Fresh Waves for the Mind, dedicated to create a platform where professionals from both language industry and academia can share their professional experiences, and where we also explore different career paths at different stages. Today we have a new episode, and my guest for today is Mark Gibson. I'm really honored and happy to have him on the podcast. So Mark, thank you so much for accepting the invitation.
Thank you for having me on. You realize that this is a con, don't you? Because we want you on our podcast. So I'll give you my story so long as we get yours, because yours is more interesting than mine.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. I really like about finding out about people's stories and how we get to where we are and the challenges that we face. But before we go into your story, Mark, I would just like to tell the audience that you are the founder and owner of Gibson Research Consultancy, dedicated to health research and communication company, which has a global reach. And your company serves pharma and biotech companies by providing document testing, patients insight, and obviously multilingual research support. So I just wanted to give the background why you are a perfect guest for this podcast. And yeah, once again, thank you for being here. Okay, now the first thing I'd like to know about my guests, first of all, is their passion for languages, and when and how did you discover your passion for languages? What's the start?
Yes, I think my story is quite unusual, to be honest. I didn't do very well at school. In fact, I basically failed the school experience, but not just that, but I was involved in trouble, with the police and things like that really early on. And, just typical English hooligan things, to be honest. And so I didn't do very well at school. And there was one day that I wanted to get out of the rain because it was England, Northern England, and rainy. And I ran into the library, and I just happened to be in the language learning aisle. And I remember seeing a book, Teach Yourself Swahili.
Wow.
And then another book, Teach Yourself Icelandic, Maltese, Spanish. And I thought, wow, you can teach yourself languages. So I started teaching myself languages from barely being able to read. I'm not kidding. At the age of 15, um, I I started just educating myself and started education from the beginning, from scratch. Even though I'm lucky that I had the presence of mind to think, okay, I'm going to fail school, but I'm going to start again immediately after, and just focused on languages. And so, 20 months after that situation, I had a place at Cambridge University, which was pretty. I must have worked really hard, to be honest. And so I went from 4 languages to multiple languages, and I've just kept it up all that time. So that's it, really. I didn't actually go to Cambridge. I went to another university, but the fact is that I got from that situation of failing to really the top university or the joint top university in the United Kingdom.
Wow, that's impressive. So basically, we could say that languages not only shaped your life, but they saved your life.
Yeah. And I just wonder if I had instead of walking into the language aisle, maybe if I walked into the electrical engineering aisle, or I don't know, the army line or something like that, it could have been a different situation.
Yeah, I think that's really impressive. And did you also take particular classes to study these languages, or was it more on your own,
I
the
spent about a
acquisition of
year.
knowledges?
Yeah, I spent about a year on my own, and then I went to an adult college.
Mhm.
So it was like, I suppose, there's not that many equivalents across Europe. Maybe just Germany, but it's just a college specifically for adults who maybe haven't had a good school experience and they want to start from scratch. And I was very fortunate that the one in my town was really exceptional. And I'm very grateful to the teachers because they saw an ability there. And there are some teachers that I'm still in touch with now from that time.
Wow, that's so nice. Yeah,
Mm.
I think that's one of the great abilities of teachers to see the potential in the kids and
Mhm.
help them see their yeah, their potential basically.
Yeah, so it was them who saved me because I remember one of them was just taken by because I'm, coming from a working class background, you don't have your sights on university and things. And there was one teacher, it just wasn't a conversation in the family, nobody had gone to university.
Hmm.
There was one teacher who said, you need to be thinking about doing a degree. And then, and I just thought, well, who, me? Kind of thing. But yeah, so that's the direction I was pushed in.
And what did you study?
It was French, Spanish, and Portuguese altogether.
Okay. And how many languages do you speak or have you
Uh,
studied?
yeah, that's the crucial question. I can't remember if we had that conversation before, but I hate saying I speak X, Y, Z. It's I studied.
Yeah.
So dozens. I don't know what the figure is to be honest. But I don't know. But I know that because in any given day we are dealing with data in 20 plus languages, and there's lots and lots of languages where I don't even need a dictionary. I can just um, read
Wow.
whether it's I don't know, it's like Belarus or Zulu. It's just I can just read them. Just
Wow, that's amazing. Very
so
impressive. Yeah.
it's probably a good reading knowledge of over 100 languages. Where it's like, and where you can listen to anything on the TV and that kind of thing, and you can just you can follow it, you can understand it. But speaking, I think I wouldn't speak any languages as well as you speak English or Spanish. It's just a bit under that level, but not quite. So um, nobody would ever say to me, "Oh, wow, which part of Spain are you from?" If I speak Spanish, uh, or which part of Germany are you from? If I speak German, most of them are saying, what's he trying to say? Is he okay? Does he need help?"
But I
But
think yeah,
yeah,
I think that's also because you, as you mentioned, you self-study these languages, right? So it's
yeah,
more based on reading and comprehension rather than conversational type
yeah.
of study. Hmm.
Yeah, I can do that as well. But there's another thing is that I'm a very old man now, and I am 30 years beyond my peak. So maybe in the 90s I could speak languages like you speak English, and but it's just a bit atrophied, and I'm fine with that because I've still got the same passion as I had when that moment I walked into the library, and I still learn new languages. I really love learning Creole languages like Papiamento and Haitian Creole, and um, just all the languages, and languages like Swiss German and Plattdeutsch and Frisian and Romansh. Switzerland's one of my favorite places on the planet, and I need to. And Romansh is just such an amazing story. I love it. Catalan, Occitan, Gallego, all of those. So that's where my passions are.
Well, I'm really impressed, and yeah, I'm really honored to be able to have this conversation with you because
No,
you
not
don't
at all.
meet people that have so much knowledge of languages on a daily basis. So yeah, thank you for sharing. And now, being aware of your passion for languages since you were a teenager, can you just tell us what was the motivation to found Gibson Research Consultancy? And what exactly is the mission of the company?
Okay, so I kind of had I my first degree was a translation degree, so I started as a translator and worked a very short period of time as a translator because I saw how bad it was. Just kidding. No, but I immediately moved into more of an academic career.
Hmm.
Um, and so very early on, I had three or four parallel things that I was keeping up at the same time. One of them was kind of sociolinguistics and language and society. And from there, I got into language and health communication, written
Hmm.
health communication, patient voice research. And then um, I got into linguistic validation very early on and usability testing. And then I set up a readability testing company on the basis of um, learning from uh, just the stuff I'd learned at MAPI about linguistic validation. So I thought that, wow, this here is completely applicable and transferable to that there. And it's kind of that peripheral vision that has never left me,
Hmm.
really. I approached MAPI actually, and this was 2003 or something like that. And they were talking about buying me out for that because I was their cognitive debriefer for UK English,
Hmm.
and so eventually they all of them just converged in, and I also had an academic career in kind of medical sociology. I started a PhD. I actually started two PhDs, and just business took over. So the PhD was on life support for
Hmm.
2 years maybe, and I was still paying for it, and I had no intention of giving up. I remember the during the literature review phase, instead of concentrating and just getting down, I learned seven new languages. You know,
Wow.
including yours, Romanian. Um, so I've kind of I am like an academic at heart, but I lost my way really, and I lost my way in business.
Being an
Uh,
entrepreneur. Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. I don't like to think of myself as a business person, really. I'm just more, just I have just ideas and passions,
Hmm.
and the motivation of just communicating, um, just being able to communicate well. Because I started off at a very low position in society, to be honest, and that has never left me.
Yeah. Great. And when you mentioned about funding Gibson Research Consultancy, because you were basically connecting the dots of what was the necessity, right? From patients' insights, from linguistic services, linguistic validation, and also the health and communication part.
Hmm.
So from readability testing, so on and so forth, from all the services that your company offers, what do you think would really set apart Gibson Research Consultancy from other companies available on the market?
Um, I think the, I mean, the expertise that I have and the team has is genuine. It's deep,
Hmm.
um, and it's now decades long. And you know, uh, I just we're a learning company where we just continue learning. There isn't an end of that path. That
Hmm.
you just it's lifelong. Whereas you could see other people are kind of resting on their laurels a bit. Just um, I see things like medical sociology, patient voice kind of thing is it's like climbing Everest, really. Up,
Hmm.
it's just a huge undertaking,
Yeah. So
really, and it's a massive subject.
Yeah, from the way you are speaking about your company and the services that you offer to the medical sector and pharma companies, I think that what really stands out is your passion and the way that you do this in order to really support research, advance in research, and support the patients and providing them access to multilingual content, right? Because that's what you do through linguistic validation. If we were to speak about clinical outcome assessments, which is the next part I'm interested in.
Mhm.
So if we talk about linguistic validation of clinical outcome assessments, from your experience, what would be the major challenges that you face or the industry faces when translating clinical outcome assessments?
I think that there is a lot of flattening of expertise in the area, and it's an area where people see there's a lot of what I call service refugees. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to be disrespectful with that, but there are people whose original commercial proposition has been eroded by AI, and they see the next thing, like they see patient voice as their next thing, something to pin their colours on, something to cling on to as the sea levels of AI rise.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got, I call them future islands of areas that are kind of protected from AI for now, because just reading the literature about um, AI, for example, and there will come a time where there are simulated clinical trials, so you won't need actual patients, and therefore you won't need patient insights.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that could be years and years in the future, but it's not an area that's protected. Um, and so I just feel that there's been a flattening of expertise because everybody is an expert. There are people we know, who are pushing the patient voice agenda when they have none at all. They have nothing at all, not even in linguistic validation. And kind of cognitive debriefing is possibly the easiest area, the easiest piece of research to get into. And so people have one or two experiences with cognitive debriefing and think, right, I'm a researcher now. And That's not the case because somebody asked me, said, look, I've done 390 um, patient interviews for cognitive debriefing. Surely that counts for something for patient voice.
Mm-hmm.
And, I said, well, it's the equivalent of playing 390 minutes of a football game, but patient voice research is baseball. It's a different thing, or it's American football or rugby. It's a
Mm-hmm.
completely different sport. And for me, that is one of the biggest challenges is just this flattening of expertise. And, from a procurement point of view, companies are just becoming less and less discerning as to who are the experts and who are just the quislings and interlopers and imitators.
I understand, yeah, definitely. And I really appreciate your perspective on AI and the impact it has in the translation industry, specifically to linguistic validation. And what's your perspective on the role of cultural diversity and cultural adaptation regarding the translation of clinical outcome assessments? How important is to adapt, to culturally adapt the content? I mean, obviously it's important, but I would like to know your personal perspective on this and what are the main challenges there?
I think the very basic tenet is that each item needs to be conceptually equivalent across languages.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's totally fine, you know. But it's way beyond that as well. One of the things I write about in my blog articles and explainer videos is just this notion of cultural coding and cultural stripping. So something cultural coding is when a word acquires additional meaning
Mm-hmm.
in or additional connotation, or it's almost like being quoted in a glaze of something of extra meaning, and that could be negative as well. It could, so you take the word cancer and then you translate it even into languages like Italian. You don't have to go as far afield as Hindi or other languages, non-Western languages, and it takes on all kinds of um, kind of taboo and stigma connotations around it, and also the opposite of that could be stripping, where something that is loaded in English might translate in a very neutral way in the target language. Where so that's what we need to be aware of, and just behind me there is a book by Mona Baker. I
Mona
don't know
Baker.
if it's
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
It's
definitely.
it's the book that everybody reads in
Yes.
translation first class. But there's one company in the US who hasn't read that, because the almost the first sentence um um of that textbook is that there is no such thing as a perfect translation. Now you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So I mean that is just fact. It's part of translation theory. It's part of translation fact, and so that carries through across COA. There is no such thing as a perfect translation. So that's where you get things like quoting and stripping on, and so that makes cultural equivalence difficult. Is it possible to actually achieve that? You can approach it maybe, and I think the conversation needs to move on to it can't just be the translation of items from
Mm-hmm.
usually US, UK English to myriad languages. It can't just be that word for word translation or
Yeah.
concept for concept translation. There are other things that need to be addressed. For example, a lot of items, a lot of core have been developed in a Western cultural context, and that cultural context prizes things like autonomy
Mm-hmm.
and coping on your own. And there's a lot of items that are geared up towards: are you able to, or to what extent have you been able to dress yourself over the past month? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, things like autonomy and coping and individualism are not markers of quality of life in other cultures, and I think that needs to be considered. Another thing that needs to be considered with eCore is it's not just a transfer of this item that originated on paper is now in electronic format. There needs to be proper usability done.
Hmm.
Uh, that and that usability can't just be some kind of clumsy adaptation of cognitive debriefing. I've seen instances where screenshots have been printed off on paper and tested, and that is the usability test. That's not a usability test. It's cognitive debriefing, paper-based cognitive debriefing,
Mm-hmm.
and because there's all kinds of other things that need to be taken into account that aren't taken into account, like the cognitive burden of reading core on paper or reading a core electronically, and that differs from language to language, and reading reading script, reading direction, and culture to culture as well. So, and these are areas that are completely understudied and need to be addressed with urgency, really.
Yeah. So basically,
If
you would like to raise the awareness that cognitive debriefing and usability testing definitely are not the same, because sometimes it seems like they are used as synonyms, right, as interchangeable processes, but in reality, they are really not. They are different ways of testing the translation, right?
Yes, yes. So you have well, usability testing is usually about the technology as well. So ideally, it should be two sides of the same coin.
Mhm.
It should be on the one side you have content, and on the other side you have functionality, and that is the core system. And even if the content has been cognitively debriefed and gone through all of the validation process on the paper, on paper, or even electronically, it still needs to be tested in terms of the usability test because it's on this system.
Mm.
It's a unique way of or a new way of deploying that core, and therefore the content shouldn't be ignored. And similarly with cognitive debriefing, the functionality, there are aspects of functionality that we see in cognitive debriefing that are often ignored, like arrows, back, forward, save, submit, that kind of thing. These need to be tested. All of the visuals need to be tested across languages because otherwise you don't have that opportunity to conduct to get and these are aspects of patient voice as well. You don't have that opportunity to get so much data across so many countries.
Yeah, definitely. And what I also heard from your message about cultural adaptation or mm, the barriers, the challenges, is not only at a translation level, right? As you said, that most of the COAs are developed in English US or English UK, but it's also at the level of designing the core, right? That's also a shift that we need to approach, that it's not only at a translation level, but also the developers, once they
Mm-hmm.
start to develop the core, should take into consideration this cultural diversity.
And reading direction and typeface, there is the assumption that everything has to look and feel exactly the same as the source. I think we need to move away from that because sometimes the source can be in a typeface and font size that is completely inappropriate for the writing systems, like Georgian and Tamil and Thai and Korean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what I really liked about when I went to the webpage of your company, you have there a research hub or where you write articles and you just dive into your interest topics and you write articles about it. And I think it's a very interesting place to go whenever someone is interested in anything that has to do with healthcare communication, multilingual content, and all the services that your company offers. Can you just confirm whether this is another proof of the passion that you have for reading and then transferring that information through writing those articles? Because as you mentioned, you don't identify yourself as a business person. And I was really surprised to see so many articles already available there and such a great range of topics. You go from, as we mentioned, cultural diversity to healthcare to how do you spend your time to, apart from leading your company, attending conferences and doing all the corporate work to say so, to reading and writing for the people and giving them access through your webpage to see
Yeah,
what you think about and what your perspective. And I really encourage everyone to check your webpage. It's a really nice place to check research and interesting
I,
ideas.
I have to thank my team for that. They had, I was basically in the habit of just wherever I was traveling, I would be taking 10 books or whatever and just
Mhm.
reading a lot of them. And just over there, I have 36 full notebooks, um, just all of the books, just haven't, I just don't stop. And I remember being on a flight once with my colleague Alejandra, and I was just going from Boston to Panama, and I was just writing my notes, and I think that was notebook number 32. And she said to me, "Do you not think you should just start publishing?" And then uh, I remember sort of calculating in my head. I was thinking, "Oh, I'm not ready yet. I need to read this, and I need to read that." And I was thinking, if I did read everything I wanted to read, and type up all the notes that I've taken. I'll probably be about 66 before I started writing. So the articles that I have there are imperfect. They're just written quickly and they're just literally taken from the notes that I have, just compiled and just right there, there, Alejandro, I've done it.
So you were really encouraged by your team to continue to publish, even
Yeah.
though it's not a very, as you say, scientific worked paper, but I think it's really useful for everyone who has some curiosity on this field. So yeah, I think it's something that we really appreciate. I did enjoy some of the articles I read there, so yeah, I wanted to thank you personally. And
Oh, thank you. It should be all of the articles, though, not just some of them. You should say you enjoyed all of them.
I still have some of them on my list. I haven't finished all of them, but yeah, definitely. I'm interested in the rest. Going backward to your personal and professional trajectory, because you have a really interesting story. And the fact that you've built the company, you've grown it, and you offer multiple services, you serve the industry and you serve the patients, especially through the services that you offer. Um, I would like to know about a specific or a turning moment, some other turning moment different than the one in your teenage era. Do you remember of any particular turning moment in your professional career? And I'm specifically interested in how did you handle it? What was the learning that you got from there? Mm, What was the outcome? Did it shift anything in your professional career?
Oh, absolutely. I think I, I would say that I've the good and bad mistake, the good decisions and the bad mistakes I've made have been about an equal measure. Maybe the fact that I'm still around, it might be 51% decent or okay um, decisions and 49% really bad ones. So that's why I say I'm not a business person. I've just been kind of adrift, making making good and bad decisions, and because I worked on my own for a long time,
Mhm.
um, and I think my team have saved me really because I was just drifting from one bad client relationship to another, so those were learning um you know things that I had to learn from, and so my team, they you should always you should always hire people who are better than you at things. And I mean, I'm saying this to you, and you've managed hundreds of people. For me, that's inconceivable. I couldn't be at that position. It's just not me. Um, but in small teams, in small teams, you're basically naked. Really, figuratively, of course. But um, so my team know all of my weaknesses and they know all of my strengths. And the same with them. And that's why we fit really well because we complement each other's strengths and weaknesses. And if it wasn't for them, I think I'd probably be unemployed by now. I'd be, uh, you know, I'd be working in a coffee bar or something.
But I think that's so nice of you to recognize the value of your team, and especially by selecting them to be able to select such
Mm,
valuable persons, because in the end, it says that the people that we surround with really are a proof of our value as well, right? And as you all said, you really know each other and you support
mm,
because you complement so well.
mm.
And that's so nice. I really like the message that you shared here.
Yeah, absolutely. But I've also made really bad mistakes with staff, and one of the mistakes I was really shocked by is giving friends jobs, when they really need it, when
Hmm.
giving people who you're not friendly with and they're in a bad situation, then you give them a job, and then they turn out to be, oh God, that's I didn't realize you were like that in the workplace, and then friendship ends because you have to fire them, or there was one time we brought in a CEO because I describe myself as a reluctant CEO because I don't want to. I haven't got those skills, and I just want to be writing. I like being really deeply involved in projects,
Hmm.
and I like generate thinking about new ideas and just writing. So I'm not a CEO type person, and we brought in a CEO who lasted 5 weeks. Because I'll describe this person as a they. Um, so they um, came in from a big company, and they lasted 5 weeks because, like I said, you come into a small company and your strengths and weaknesses are completely laid bare. And it took us maybe 3 days to realize, my goodness, who is this person and how
Yeah.
much do they cost?
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
it's,
And I think it's
yeah.
it's different to engage with corporations, right? Where the processes are much more maybe rigid, to say so. You
Mm,
have specific teams handling specific part of the process. Nobody knows maybe the entire, maybe they do know the entire process, but they do not work on the entire process. While in a smaller company, the positive aspect is that you have to have a global understanding of everything and get yourself into basically every task, right? Because
mhm,
it's
mhm,
not so siloed. Also because there are not so many people, so the work has to be done as a at a smaller team
mhm,
level, so people get to know each other, interact more
mhm,
often, compared to a multinational company where there are lots of hundreds of people, but sometimes you just don't interact and you have an idea of what they do,
yeah.
but you don't really know what they do.
And I think conversely, it would be the same for me entering a bigger company. But we went through the process of acquisition a couple of years ago, and it
Hmm.
it would have it would have meant joining a much bigger company.
Hmm.
I don't think I would have survived a month, honestly, with my personality. I think, and so that's why I'm saying to you, like the knowing about your previous roles. Like I say, it's unachievable for me to do that. I just wouldn't be able to do it. So kudos to you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's just a matter of flexibility and understanding what you like and what you don't. Just as you mentioned,
Mm,
know your strengths and know your weaknesses. It's perfectly fine to know that, for example, for me, I've never tried to be an entrepreneur to set my own business, definitely. And this is something I really admire about you, right? Because you were able to, even though you don't feel yourself as an entrepreneur and business person, but you had the courage to do it. And after more than 20 years, you're on the market, you have a nice team, you're supporting a lot of pharma companies. And I think, again, it's just a matter of what we've chosen at particular moments in our lives and having the courage to continue. And I'm
mm,
sure that if at any moment you have to change is just another learning curve. I think that I was really impressed to find out about how many services you offer and especially the passion that you put into it. And I think that's something that clients will definitely notice because when you really care about your company, when you really care about the services that you offer, that's also reflected in the quality, the way you engage with the customers, the way you engage with your team. And that's something that you've already acknowledged. And yeah, I'm really happy that we are able to have this conversation and to make, give the opportunity through this podcast to reflect the value that Gibson Research Consultancy brings in the industry. And yeah, I'm really amazed about the turning moment that you mentioned. It was, I'm sure it was not a short one, but rather a learning curve, as you said, a long one, because when you identify yourself in such a situation where you have to lean into your team and basically leave your ego apart, but rather lean into your team, I think that's an amazing capacity. And that's where the strength of any person leading a company stays. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I just find um, just the idea of leader, just the term leader is something that I really don't identify with
Okay.
at all. It sounds, I think the problem is in business, a lot of people are working as directors and
Mm-hmm.
VPs and things like that who have personality disorders, and part of the reason why they got to the position that they're at is because they are bullies and cruel. There's in our societies there seem well when our societies I'm talking about UK US you seem to be rewarded for just being nasty, being a bit of a psychopath, and there's so many of them. I've met so many of them. John Ronson wrote a book called The Psychopath Test about 15 years ago, and he talks about just the disproportionate amount of people with psychopathic and sociopathic tendencies in upper management of companies, and that's definitely my experience. And I think so basically, if we're talking about empathy, to to be a leader, you also need to have empathy, and that that doesn't chime with being a sociopath or a psychopath. And I'm not using those terms lightly. We might even be thinking of very similar people. And it's like, for example, there was a conference that um, we went to recently where I'm not sure if we spoke at that conference, but I remember talking to your colleagues at the time. And I was looking at the attendee list.
Mm-hmm.
And there was about 60 people who described themselves as disruptors. Now, so what was this conference? Was it Davos, the World Economic Forum, something like that? No, it was a quality of life conference.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so every other person was describing themselves as a disruptor. And, it's just, I find that disruptor is not a term that you apply to yourself. It's what other people should describe you as. So it's like putting on your business card, Mark Gibson, genius. No, no. And also if you call yourself a disruptor and what exactly is your role at this conference we're talking about? You're manning an exhibition stand. That's not disrupting, that's selling, you know. So that's I just find all of these people in um this sector uh, just a lot of them just don't have the attributes that you really should have for management and leadership and for nurturing.
Yeah, and
That's
then coming to
limited.
this concept of leadership, what's the image of a good leader according to you?
Not me. Um, a good leader would be a composite of the other directors that I have in the company. So, just great listeners,
Hmm.
um, well organized people, and just huge empathy as well. Where you don't just work for a company, you become part of a family, really. And there's a lot of pushback about, oh, we're not a company, we are a family. In many respects, that sounds a bit creepy, but and insincere is the word I'm thinking of, but it genuinely is the case with our and we have staff all across the world, and
Hmm.
um, and we genuinely love each other. I mean, in a real sense,
Yeah,
and
that's great to hear. And I do agree with you that active listening and sometimes it's true that from a leadership position, it's just that desire of authority. It's just because I say, because I'm the manager, because I'm the director,
yeah, yeah.
instead of listening to the team members because they are doing the work, they know what are their challenges, right? So I strongly agree with what you said, that active listening is something that should be highly encouraged in upper management positions, and giving the team a voice to hear their challenges, to see how we can improve, because an empowered team will have a great engagement with the customers if they feel
Mhm,
valued and empowered,
mhm,
contrary to the situation where you just don't listen to them and do what I say just because I'm the manager.
mhm,
So I think that leadership nowadays is something really important, regardless of whether we're talking about a small or big company.
mhm. Yes, and I've made those mistakes as well, where it's like you listen to me, it's my company kind of thing. I've had
Mhm.
those tantrums as well, and but, it's a very ugly state of mind to be in, really, and it's just the sheer aggression of it and the violence, emotional violence, and I think in the past, when you're a small company and you partner with huge companies, and that's what we normally do.
Mhm.
Um, for a while, I struggled against people just thinking that we are weak people. So, and people really can be disrespectful and just think, they're just like mosquitoes, them, GRCs, let's just swap them away. They're just a small company, they're insignificant. Well, actually, we're keeping your service afloat, actually.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
partnership in the end, right? So
yeah,
you need to respect your partners.
yes, exactly. And so those people, they go from project manager, senior project manager, project junior director, director, senior director, VP, senior VP, and they have grown. Actually, they've just been in this one organization or similar
Mhm.
organizations, and they haven't been through a transformation that you and I would have been through, or any other normal human being would have been through. They've just been in this big organization, and it's just not. They haven't grown spiritually, and I see them over and over again at conferences. The same people that I knew 15 years ago, like making a point of talking loudly into a phone and barking commands down a phone for the performance so other people can hear that.
Mhm.
An ego thing. Yeah, I'm not interested in working with people like that, to be honest.
I mean, there are people that are not so open to changing careers. They start their career for example, in a multinational company, and they just climb the ladder, what we say, right? But they don't move to other companies. They don't see other, maybe they do move departments within the same company, and they might see a slightly different type of leadership. But definitely, if you move out of companies and you have this flexibility of switching companies, and here I'm not talking about being a job hopper, but rather having a
Mhm,
strategic
mhm,
shift from one company to the other. I think that brings you a lot of opportunities to understand different work styles, different leadership, different ways of doing the same thing, most probably. And I really appreciate people that have the courage to switch jobs, to put themselves into new contexts, either from big company to small ones or the other way around. I think it's something that grows you as a person and as a professional.
And um I think within the translation agency industry, rather,
Mhm.
there are instances where translators are treated appallingly, just in terms of the money that they are paid, and because it's a race to the bottom, and it has been for a number of years. And and also the personal treatment that they get from um, project managers and we sometimes partner with LSPs where we get that treatment as well, but that's the last project that we do for them. You know, they lose us as soon as they start that with us. But on the other hand, because I told you my first degree was translation, and I kept
Mhm.
languages up, and uh, I always held translators with a really high respect, you know. But they were standing on holy ground as far as
Yeah.
I was concerned, and so I had an idealized version of a translator. But when I started actually working with them about 20 years ago, oh my goodness, you realize that there's a um, it's a bit like the Forrest Gump thing. Life is like a box of chocolates, and you never know which one you're gonna get. And so you can onboard a translator who has perfect references and things like that, and but is really terrible. And I came up informally with the like a pyramid, a pyramid.
Mhm.
So at the apex, you have real elite um, translators, you know, people like yourself, people with PhDs, and um, people who translate Cervantes or um, I don't know, Goethe or Dostoevsky, people who bring us world peace.
Mhm.
Um, and then you have a middle band of kind of so-so, good to so-so translated. A lot of the people who work in the cognitive business are those good, so, okay, they're okay, but they're not quite the elite. And then you
Mhm.
have a wide base of um, I won't tell you. I've written it in a blog article, and it's not a nice word what I described. And you never know which of those you're going to get from those three bands. And so I was really disappointed just with the just because of that uncertainty. It takes once you start working with translators, it takes a long while to settle on a group of translators that are really good. And I think that this is what our mutual friend Nor Ferrante has been expert at, is bringing
Yes.
together all of these elite. These are not good so linguists that she brings together. These are the elite, and um, so it's really it's heartening to know that the people there, because I'd lost complete faith with translators. In fact, as far as cognitive debriefing is concerned, we switched from using translators to only using professional interviewers and medical healthcare professionals and psychologists and academics and that sort of thing. We in our network, we have about 22,000 people in our network, and a lot
Mhm.
of them are interviewers. And we probably use about five linguists who are interviewers, people who we've used for years. And so it's meeting Noah's group that I think, oh, thank goodness there are. I've got faith in humanity again, because I was writing down what I call the translator's excuses. And I'm sure you've got plenty of stories as well. Because there's the distance, and it's remote and you don't see the people. So they will give you excuses that you wouldn't give a person if you were looking eye to eye
Mhm.
and seeing them in 3D. Like excuses like my eye fell out. Sorry, I couldn't. So I'm not kidding. So sorry, I couldn't complete this piece of work because my eye fell out. Sorry, there was one of them um, that said I couldn't complete this piece of work because I have a tickly cough. One of them was honest and said, I decided to have a party last night. At least I respect that. I thought that translators were a really unfortunate group of people because there's so much stuff that happens to them right on deadline time, not at any other point during the project, but it's right on deadline time. And like you can't you get to the point where you get told that somebody in their family has died and you just don't believe them anymore, because you've had so much of it. They are always liking my articles, and they were late with a piece of work about this was about 10 years ago, and they said, sorry, I was late. My nephew was ill and I had to donate a kidney. 6 months later, sorry, I'm late. My uncle was ill and I had to give him one of my kidneys. So he has.
Yeah, I can see your point of view, and definitely it is disappointing. And this is where I like to, and that's how I work with my team. I encourage them to treat their own professional career, regardless of the company where they are working on or the project, as a project itself, right? The way you stand up for yourself, the way you show up in front of your colleagues, your clients. If you're talking about translators, most of them are freelancers, right? So the fact how you engage and how you stand up for yourself will set up your level of professionalism, right? And it's just we are not simple translators to say so. We are project managers, either we like it or not, officially or not officially, but we are project managers. So apart from translations, doing the proper translation, you have to manage your schedule, your time, the communication. So it's true that we all can have personal situations, but if you really are aware of what it means to you as a professional, again, how you show up and the impact it has on the other ones, if you inform that in advance and not on the day of delivery, that would give you a more professional image and it would allow your client to maybe find other solutions. Maybe you are still on time to reassign the project to someone else. So it would be even easier to simply be honest and show up in a professional manner rather than sometimes inventing excuses, right? And yeah, I always encourage the people I work with to really consider their role as their professional project, because every interaction you have, it can build up on a relationship or it can ruin it. Yeah.
No, that's absolutely true. And also, I'm not painting a picture of I'm no saint either. I in the early years of my career, I really struggled to be organized.
Yeah.
And so I would start work too late in the process and have working overnight and that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it just wasn't just again, my team saved me. So there could be people who would be listening to this. For example, at that time, I was doing a lot of work for one of your previous companies, and they might be thinking, "Wow, he's full of it." Because I remember him, this and that. I'd hold my hands up to that, and again, it was my team who saved me.
Yeah.
They just took me by the hand, literally, and just said, let's work
Yeah.
better.
You're right.
So that's
We are all evolving, right? So you don't know your job from the very beginning, but if you are committed to your professional development, then you take a moment to step back and just realize, oh, I didn't react correctly when engaging with this client, or the fact that I didn't inform in advance, or whatever it is. But it's just that own awareness, right? Or any client feedback, instead of reacting and being on an aggressive mode of, oh, this client is so demanding or whatever. Just take a step and see how you can really improve. And yeah, definitely we've all been at the initial stage, but if we really care about our careers, then we are more aware of how we engage, and we try to improve as much as we can on with every interaction, with every project.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And it is that it's that growth that is it's crucial.
As we are now getting closer to the end of the interview, I would like to maybe encapsulate three main pieces of advice you would give either to your younger self or to someone who is in the localization industry or someone who wants to join from a different industry into ours. What would be the main three pieces of advice you can think of?
For myself, I would just if I could speak to myself, say 15, 20 years ago, I'd just say just be comfortable with your awkwardness.
Hmm, I like that.
Really, just
Yeah.
just so what? You're not like everybody else, and just embrace it, really. Otherwise, because you can be anxious about not being like other people.
Hmm.
For people entering into the industry, I would say develop the peripheral vision as early as you can. So what
Hmm.
is applicable and transferable and translatable in one area can be done in another area, and identify those areas, because that type of, like you say, we have multiple services, but and sometimes within cognitive debriefing there are peaks and there are troughs of activity,
Hmm.
and it's the other services that carry us through and things like that. And so it's the peripheral vision. And what was the other group of people? Like,
The
so
third
myself.
category will be people from other industries wanting to join ours, the localization and linguistic validation, clinical outcome assessments.
Right, I'm going to say something really brutal, because I'm getting a bit fed up of the imitators and the quizzlings. Uh, that if you hadn't worked out that your job was going to be under threat by AI 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I've got no pity for you. Really, you should have worked it out.
Be aware of the trends of the industries and get prepared in advance rather than
Mhm.
when it's already the wave
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
reaching us, right?
Mhm. And it's one of the reasons why some people in my company joined me about 7 or 8 years ago, because they already saw that dip where they were translators and then most of their job was post editing,
Hmm.
and they had the good sense to jump then. That was 2016, 17.
Yeah, and also because the learning curve is not so aggressive, right? Because when you just join with the wave on top of you, definitely it's
Hmm. Yeah,
the feeling
yeah.
of anxiety is much, much higher than if you learn it in a nicer, slower way.
So you have people jostling with their elbows out now. Just there are business practices that I'm seeing. Like I said, everybody's a disruptor, and
Mhm.
everybody is a patient voice researcher all of a sudden, and every company is a patient voice company. So companies have gone from translation companies to calling themselves language service providers, and now they're patient voice companies without any grounding whatsoever in patient voice, what the building blocks of patient voice are. Those are the companies I want to stay well away from. And because I find them just wholly unimpressive. Because they're faking, they're imitating, and also you have quite a few freelancers who are faking this um, expertise as well, even putting it in their um, name, in their LinkedIn profile name. So um, first name, surname, linguistic validation expert. No, you're not, because you haven't done any projects yet. So how can you be one? And I've seen the same with readability testing and patient voice research. And so, as I said, for clients, it's difficult to be discerning. And just like me with the pyramid of translators, it's going to take people a while to discern
Mhm. Who
who's
are
at
the
that top.
experts and who are the
Yeah,
ones
yeah.
trying to jump into the field and presenting themselves as experts while they are still building that reputation of experts, right? And I think that's the main differentiator now in this all AI noise, or whatever we want to call it, right? Agitation. The fact that if you really stay true to yourself, each one of us has a unique set of skills, a unique set of seeing things, right? Even if you and I were to read the same book, we can get different way of understanding it, of correlating it with other books or parts from our experience. So the idea is, rather than, it's okay to get inspired by others, but in the end, the most important thing is to stay authentic. And as you said, celebrate your authenticity, your awkwardness, whatever it is, but just be yourself and make sure that the way you interact with the others represents yourself as a person, rather than imitating and faking that you are someone who you aren't, because that's not sustainable, and in the end will only create frustration and will ruin your career, your professional career also. Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. I really enjoyed such an honest conversation and open conversation. I appreciate sharing your perspective on so many aspects of our industry, the struggles that you have, the turning moments in your career. I really enjoyed the conversation. And once again, the fact that you were so honest is really something that I appreciate significantly.
Well, thank you very much, but I only did it so that you come on our podcast. I'll remember that.
I will, definitely, I will. And before we finish the podcast, I just wanted to remind our audience where they can find you, or maybe just Google search Gibson Research Consultancy. You can check there. I will also put it on the notes. Can you just say the webpage of the company?
Right, so it's grc-health.com.
Okay, so yeah, make sure to go to the webpage of Gibson Research Consultancy, check the services that they offer, and also the articles that Mark is drafting from his notes. Get inspiration from there. And if anyone has any other doubts or queries from the interview that we have, just feel free to drop us some comments, and we will be more than happy to try to reply. So thank you so much, Mark, for your time and your honest conversation. And yeah, I'm looking forward to stay in contact.
Yes, thank you.